Welcome the Lord's chosen. Never pay for a hit you can't afford to survive. That's not just a warning, it's a prophecy. History proves it. More than 80% of assassination attempts worldwide don't kill the target, they transform them. The ones who walk away don't just live, they evolve. They come out sharper, colder, and far more dangerous than before. Now imagine the irony. Your enemies thought they were clever, pulling out their wallets to end your story. But instead of buying your funeral, they accidentally purchased front row seats to their own downfall. That's the thing about playing chess with someone who was born an assassin. Every piece they move only exposes their king. And if we're being honest, paying people to attack you, that's not strategy. That's the world's most expensive suicide note, with express delivery. Number one, they didn't hire attackers. They signed your training contract. They didn't hire attackers. They signed your training contract. That's the brutal truth behind it all. When people think they're plotting your downfall, they rarely realize they're actually financing the very process that makes you untouchable. Every blow they sent your way, every scheme they paid for, every ambush they designed wasn't the end of you. It was a lesson plan disguised as violence. And whether they knew it or not, they became the unwilling sponsors of your evolution. It's almost comical when you think about it. They assumed their money bought your destruction, but all it bought was your sharpening. Every hit taught you something new. Every betrayal forced you to see angles you would have otherwise ignored. Their attacks became the drills that built your patience, your speed, and your ability to read danger before it even entered the room. They weren't weakening you, they were upgrading you. The funniest part is how blind they were to what was happening in real time. They thought you were stumbling, losing, barely holding on. But behind the surface, every strike was carving discipline into your bones. Every attempt was chiseling away the unnecessary and leaving behind the assassin in you that no one could bargain with or buy out. What they saw as you being broken was actually you being recalibrated. There's a kind of poetic justice in it. The very hands that tried to bury you were the ones watering the soil of your power. They believed they were paying for your end, but they were actually investing in your rise. And the irony runs deep. They thought they had the advantage because money was on their side, but money can't buy instinct. It can't buy resilience. It can't buy that sharpened inner vision that comes only from surviving the fire. At the end of the day, their assassins didn't create fear in you. They created mastery. You didn't just survive their contract, you outgrew it. You turned their investment into your inheritance, their suicide mission into your curriculum, and by the time they realized what they had really done, it was already too late. They had paid for your evolution in full. Number two, they paid for your awakening, not your ending. They paid for your awakening, not your ending. That's the cruel twist they'll never admit out loud. When they gathered their money together, whispered in secret corners, and handed over cash to see you gone, they thought they were buying silence. But what they actually bought was your clarity. The moment someone tries to erase you, something snaps inside. You stop living half asleep, you stop drifting, and suddenly your senses sharpen in ways you didn't even know were possible. Their money didn't purchase your death. It funded your awakening. You see, endings are easy. Anyone can imagine someone's downfall. But what's far harder to kill is the part of you that's been waiting for a reason to rise. And that's exactly what they unlocked when they made their move. The threat on your life wasn't the conclusion they hoped for, it was the alarm clock that shook you awake. Every attempt they threw at you burned away illusions, stripped you of distractions, and left you with nothing but raw awareness. You became tuned in to the smallest details, sensitive to movements, alert to patterns, not because you wanted to, but because you had to. The irony is thick. They thought they were removing you, but they actually revealed you. Before their attacks, maybe you lived in pieces, not fully conscious of the depth of your own strength. After them, there was no going back. You started to see things differently, move differently, breathe differently. What they intended as an end actually pressed you into alignment with who you always were underneath. That's what makes their mistake unforgivable. They didn't just fail to destroy you, they accidentally activated the very version of you that cannot be destroyed. They shook you into focus, and once you've tasted that kind of awareness, there's no undoing it. They thought they had taken something from you, but the truth is, they gave you the one thing they could never afford to hand over, yourself. So when the smoke cleared and the dust settled, it wasn't your body lying still in defeat, it was their plans. They funded your awakening without even knowing it, and now they're stuck with the nightmare of realizing the assassin they feared most is the one they accidentally unleashed. Number 3, their suicide mission was your survival curriculum. Their suicide mission was your survival curriculum. That's the truth hidden inside the chaos they created. What they designed to finish you off became the very process that trained you to endure, adapt, and outlast. Every ambush, every close call, every betrayal was supposed to close your story, but instead it opened chapters of discipline and resilience that could never have been written any other way. They unknowingly put you through a school of survival where the price of admission was their own downfall. The mission they launched wasn't really about killing you. It was about testing what you were made of. And the test didn't break you. It forged you. Each attack forced you to study yourself in ways you hadn't before. You learned what your limits actually were, and then you learned how to push past them. You discovered how to keep moving under pressure, how to think when panic tried to set in, how to find strength when exhaustion whispered that you were finished. They handed you a curriculum written in danger, and you mastered it with a precision they could never anticipate. The beauty of it all is in the reversal. They were sure they were in control, sure that they had written the ending, but they underestimated what survival does to a person. When your life is on the line, instincts sharpen, awareness deepens, and your inner strength stops being theory and starts being law. What was meant to weaken you became the very training that sculpted your endurance. By sending killers, they turned you into someone who couldn't be killed. There's a kind of grim humor in their mistake. They thought they had cornered you, but what they really did was enroll you in a program that gave you skills and clarity no one can teach in peace. Survival became second nature. Reading motives, anticipating danger, seeing through lies. Those weren't just things you practiced, they became reflexes. And all of it happened because they thought they had engineered your destruction. In the end, the mission didn't accomplish what they intended. You weren't destroyed, you were refined. You didn't collapse, you graduated. Their suicide mission wasn't a triumph over you, it was the tuition payment for your survival education. And when you walked out of it alive, it wasn't just survival, it was certification that you could never be outplayed again. Number 4, they thought you'd break, but they gave you blueprints. They thought you'd break, but they gave you blueprints. That's the mistake no one ever sees while they're in the middle of plotting your collapse. In their minds, every attack was supposed to be the moment you crumbled. They expected you to shatter under the pressure, to stumble so badly that you'd never recover. But what they didn't realize was that every move they made exposed them. Every ambush, every scheme, every betrayal was like them leaving fingerprints all over the crime scene. They weren't watching you collapse. They were handing you the instructions on how to dismantle them piece by piece. Pressure has a strange way of making people careless. In their obsession with hurting you, they revealed their habits, their weak spots, and their lack of imagination. They repeated the same tricks, leaned on the same alliances, trusted the same faulty systems. And while they thought you were barely surviving, you were actually paying attention, studying every single detail. You saw how they operated, who they depended on, what they feared, and where they were vulnerable. Their attacks didn't just toughen you, they educated you. It's almost funny how blind they were to what was really happening. They thought they were forcing you into desperation, but they were actually teaching you how to end them. The more they attacked, the more information they handed over. They gave you the map to their entire operation without realizing it. What they believed was pressure turned into exposure. What they thought was strategy became confession, and that's the irony that stings the most. The harder they came at you, the easier they made it for you to eventually take everything from them. They wrote their downfall into their own actions, and you were patient enough to let them. By the time you were done collecting every blueprint they handed you, there was nothing left for them to hide. So in the end, they didn't break you. They drafted their own obituary and passed it to you as a gift. Every ambush wasn't a strike against you, it was an instruction manual. And instead of lying in pieces, you walked away holding the blueprints to dismantle their entire world. Number 5, you were already the assassin. They just funded the proof. You were already the assassin. They just funded the proof. That's the part they'll never understand. When they sent enemies your way, they believed they were forcing you to learn survival from scratch. They thought the chaos would expose your weakness, that you'd be scrambling, unprepared, desperate to figure things out. But what really happened was far different. You weren't learning how to fight, you were remembering. Those instincts were already inside you, written into your bones, carried in your blood. All they did was pay the bill for you to awaken what was already there. It's almost insulting how they underestimated you. They looked at you as though you were a beginner stepping into a game you didn't know how to play. What they didn't realize is that your silence was preparation, not ignorance. Your calm wasn't weakness, it was patience. They confused stillness for inexperience, when in truth you were already sharper than anything they could send your way. Their mistake was assuming you had to become something new, when you were simply unfolding into what you always were. Every fight, every setup, every ambush didn't shape you. It triggered you. It called to the assassin buried beneath the surface, the one who doesn't need practice, just opportunity. You weren't trying to figure out how to survive. You were activating instincts that had been waiting for the right moment to prove themselves. That's why nothing they threw at you could finish you. They weren't building a fighter. They were paying for the revelation of one. The irony is sharp. They thought they were the architects of your strength, as if their attacks were molding you into something greater. But in reality, they were only spectators funding a show they could never headline. They weren't the reason you became dangerous. They were the reason everyone else finally got to see it. So when the dust settled, it wasn't their assassins who proved anything, it was you. The proof was never about them succeeding, it was about you remembering. You were always the weapon, always the precision, always the inevitability. They didn't build you, they financed the evidence. And now the receipt of their own mistake is stamped in the fact that you were lethal before they even started. Number 6. They paid to see you bleed, but they funded your armor instead. They paid to see you bleed, but they funded your armor instead. That's the irony that slices deeper than any wound they hoped to inflict. Their entire goal was humiliation, to watch you suffer, to make your pain the entertainment they could laugh about in the shadows. They wanted to see you crawl, to see your blood as proof that they had power over you. And yes, you did bleed. The hits landed, the betrayals cut, the weight was heavy. But what they didn't expect was that the same blood they wanted as evidence of your downfall hardened into steel around you. What was supposed to scar you instead became the armor that made you impossible to pierce. Every blow left a lesson. Every cut forced a decision, either collapse under the pain or build resistance to it. You chose the second every single time. And with each choice, you grew less vulnerable. Their attacks toughened your skin, sharpened your awareness, and sealed up the cracks they thought they were widening. Pain has a way of teaching you things comfort never will, and you learned faster than they ever anticipated. The very wounds they cheered for became the reason you can now walk through fire without burning. It's almost laughable how they miscalculated. They assumed pain was permanent, but they didn't account for healing. They didn't realize that blood dries, but the memory of how it spilled stays with you, changing how you move forever. They thought scars would define you, but what actually defined you was the armor built in the process. The body might carry marks, but the spirit carries indestructibility, and now, here's the twist that must haunt them. They can never hurt you the same way again. The spots they once targeted are no longer weak, they're reinforced. The wounds they thought would keep you limping are now shielded over, stronger than before. Every attempt they paid for only stripped them of options. They ran out of ways to touch you because they unknowingly invested in your immunity. So yes, you bled, but only for a moment. They saw the blood. They thought they'd won. But the blood dried, the armor stayed, and the person standing now is someone they can't afford to face. Their money didn't buy your collapse. It bought your invincibility. Number 7, they bought the bullets that taught you how to reload. They bought the bullets that taught you how to reload. That's the part they'll never admit. The very tools they thought would finish you became the tools that trained you. Every bullet fired at you was meant to be the last word, the end of your chapter. But each one missed its mark in the way they intended, and instead hit the exact place it needed to. Your awareness, your discipline, your timing. What they didn't understand is that you weren't just dodging bullets, you were learning from them. Every shot taught you something new about efficiency, about conserving energy, about responding with precision rather than panic. It's one thing to survive chaos, but it's another to master its rhythm. That's what happened to you. Their violence wasn't random anymore, it became a song and you learned its beat. They shot with aggression, but you responded with calculation. They wasted energy in desperation, while you learned economy of movement, how to do more with less, how to strike once instead of 10 times, how to breathe through the storm instead of choking in it. Their attempts weren't just failures, they were rehearsals that gave you mastery over timing itself. That's where control shifted. At first, they believed they were dictating the pace, chasing you, cornering you, forcing you into defense. But the longer it went on, the more the tempo changed. What was once their attack turned into your training ground. You started anticipating their rhythm before they even moved. You knew when the next shot would come, from where, and with what intent. That's not survival anymore, that's orchestration. By the end of it, they weren't leading the violence. They were dancing to your timing without realizing it. The bitter twist is that their investment worked, just not for them. They put their money into weapons and ammunition, thinking it would weaken you. All it did was strengthen your ability to reload, not just guns, but yourself. You learned how to reset, how to recalibrate, how to turn exhaustion into composure and pressure into precision. So yes, they bought the bullets, but you bought the rhythm. And once you owned the rhythm, you owned the outcome. The very violence they believed would erase you only tuned you into a tempo they could never keep up with. They funded the lesson, but you walked away as the conductor of the entire war. Number 8. They weren't buying your end, they were buying their receipt. They weren't buying your end, they were buying their receipt. That's the mistake that stains every coin they handed over, every deal they struck in secret. They thought the money they spent was an investment in erasing you, a guarantee that your story would stop where they wanted it to. But the truth is far harsher. Their payment was nothing more than a down payment on their own destruction. What they purchased wasn't your silence, it was proof of their guilt. A receipt that would one day be stamped, signed, and delivered by the very person they tried to bury. Money has a way of leaving trails. Every bribe, every payoff, every coin that crossed hands in the name of your downfall was also evidence. Evidence that would circle back and trap them. They believed they were being clever, moving in shadows, hiding behind hired hands. But the more they spent, the more they exposed themselves. They weren't removing you, they were writing their names into the contract of their own undoing. And here's the cruel beauty of it. You became the delivery system for that receipt. They thought you were the target, the one to be erased, but you became the courier of their downfall. Every failed attempt stacked the bill higher. Every ambush added another line item. Every betrayal became another signature on the invoice. By the time they realized it, the cost wasn't just financial anymore. It was their future, their reputation, their very existence. The irony is sharp enough to cut. They wanted your end to be quick, clean, forgettable. Instead, they guaranteed their own destruction would be slow, undeniable, and unforgettable. And the moment you survived what they paid for, the balance shifted. Their money didn't buy closure, it bought consequences. So when the final reckoning comes, it won't be you paying the price. It will be them, handed the very receipt they signed with their own greed and arrogance. And the stamp across the top will read one word they never expected: delivered. They never purchased your end, they prepaid for their own collapse. Number 9. Their contract wasn't against you, it was against themselves. Their contract wasn't against you, it was against themselves. That's the twisted truth they didn't see when they signed the deal and handed over their money. They thought they were drawing up papers for your death, that they were commissioning the erasure of your name, your presence, your influence, but what they really signed was the declaration of war on their own future. The moment they turned assassins toward you, they sealed the fate of their own downfall. Because survival never leaves someone the same. Survival reshapes, hardens, and arms you in ways they could never anticipate. And that new version of you was destined to become the very thing that would wipe them out. You weren't just surviving their attacks, you were evolving through them. Every attempt forced you into a version of yourself they weren't prepared to face. They kept imagining the old you, the one who could be cornered, broken, or intimidated. But the person who walked out of each ambush wasn't that person anymore. You were sharper, colder, more precise. You learned how to see through disguises, how to anticipate betrayal, how to recognize the shadow of a threat before it even appeared. Each lesson they forced on you was another weapon you carried, not against the assassins they sent, but against the architects who sent them. What they failed to realize is that assassins don't just test your strength, they shape your destiny. They thought their contract was the end of your story, but in reality, it was the drafting of their obituary. By attacking you, they built the very machine that would dismantle them. By forcing you into survival, they created the instrument of their extinction. The irony is brutal. If they had left you alone, you might never have been sharpened to this degree. But their greed, their fear, their arrogance ensured that your survival would forge you into something beyond their control. They didn't just declare war on you, they declared war on their own possibility of lasting, and in that war they funded the rise of their greatest enemy, the survivor who became their executioner. In the end, the contract didn't kill you. It only guaranteed that their future had an expiration date written in blood, theirs, not yours. Number 10. They tried to outsource fate, but you were the contractor. They tried to outsource fate, but you were the contractor. That's where their entire plan collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. They believed money could bend destiny, that by hiring others to do their dirty work, they could wash their hands of the blood and still get the outcome they craved. In their minds, fate was something negotiable, transferable, something that could be subcontracted out like cheap labor. But destiny doesn't work like that. No matter how many hands they paid, the mission was always going to circle back to you because you were the one holding the true contract. They thought assassins would finish what they couldn't. They thought hired violence could do what their own hands were too weak or too afraid to attempt. But all they did was waste money funding inevitability. The killers they sent weren't in charge of your ending. They were instruments sharpening your awareness, delivering messages back into your hands. Each attempt was a reminder that the final signature on this contract was always yours to write. And you didn't write it in surrender, you wrote it in survival. That's what they'll never admit. They weren't in control. The moment they outsourced the mission, they revealed their weakness. They confessed they couldn't face you themselves. And that confession was louder than any bullet they sent your way. Fate doesn't bend to money, it bends to strength. And strength was never on their side. The irony burns. By trying to pay their way into your destruction, they only ensured you'd end up with complete ownership of the outcome. Destiny subcontracted nothing. It handed the blueprints back to the one person it trusted to finish the job. And you finished it, not by collapsing, but by rising with more control than they ever had. So yes, they outsourced the mission, but you were always the contractor of fate. They thought they'd signed your ending, but all they really did was sign off on their own irrelevance. In the end, the job didn't go to their assassins, and it didn't stop with their schemes. It returned to the only person capable of completing it, you. And the stamp across their failed plan reads clear: fate delivered. Number 11, they misread the assignment. You don't outkill the assassin. They misread the assignment. You don't outkill the assassin. That was their first and fatal mistake. They thought numbers, noise, and chaos could overwhelm someone whose entire existence is built on precision. They confused volume for victory, believing that more attackers, more schemes, more noise would equal control. But when your identity is sharpened into exactness, when silence is your natural language, their chaos is nothing but static. And static is easy to filter out, easy to dismantle piece by piece until the battlefield is clear and you're still standing. An assassin doesn't thrive in disorder by chance. They create order inside it. That's what they never grasped. While they came at you swinging wildly, trying to bury you under noise, you stayed patient, cold, and exact. You didn't waste movement. You didn't waste words. You didn't even waste anger. You cut through their chaos with the efficiency of someone who has mastered the art of survival. Every reckless move they made was another breadcrumb leading you closer to their undoing. The truth is, their fight was never really with you. Their fight was with their own lack of discipline. They thought they could improvise against someone whose instincts are honed like a blade. They mistook your quiet for weakness and your restraint for hesitation, when really those were the very weapons they could never match. Against precision, chaos always loses because chaos burns itself out while precision never wastes energy. What makes their error even more tragic is that they actually believed they could out-assassin the assassin. They believed strategy could be replaced with noise, that instincts could be replaced with money, that skill could be replaced with desperation. But all their efforts only exposed the truth. You can't outdo someone who is the standard. By the time they realized it, the battle was already over. Their noise had been dismantled, their chaos had been silenced, and their numbers had collapsed under their own weight. And you were untouched, because precision doesn't wrestle with chaos. It waits, strikes once and ends it. So yes, they misread the assignment. They thought this was about outkilling you. But you don't outkill the assassin, you just pay the price for trying. Number 12, the trap became a laboratory. The trap became a laboratory. That's the irony etched into every failed attempt against you. They constructed snares, pitfalls, and betrayals with the intention of closing the book on your existence. But instead of ending you, those traps became controlled environments, testing grounds where your resilience and adaptability were refined to a level they couldn't comprehend. What was built to bury you transformed into the very space that exposed them and elevated you. A laboratory is where experiments happen. And that's exactly what their traps became. Every scheme forced you to analyze, to test, to adjust, to observe patterns in their behavior. Each betrayal taught you who was loyal, who was weak, and who cracked under pressure. Each ambush taught you timing, precision, and how to conserve your energy. And every inescapable snare taught you new ways of slipping through walls they thought were solid. They weren't watching you fail, they were watching you innovate. The brilliance of it lies in the reversal. They imagined they were scientists, and you were the subject. They thought they had full control over the experiment, that you would simply react as they predicted. But they didn't realize the test wasn't happening on you. It was happening on them. They exposed their desperation, their limits, their lack of strategy. They revealed their dependencies and showed you exactly where they were weakest. By the time the so-called experiment ended, you had gathered all the data you needed to dismantle them completely. Adaptability is a weapon few can master, and they forced you into mastering it. Instead of crumbling, you became fluid. You learned to adjust in real time, to thrive in pressure instead of drowning in it. That limitless adaptability turned every failure they wanted for you into a formula for their own collapse. You weren't their victim in the trap. You were the scientist studying them through the glass, taking notes on every mistake they made. So in the end, the trap didn't bury you. It educated you. It armed you with knowledge, insight, and the kind of adaptability that makes you untouchable. They thought they had cornered you in a cage. But what they really did was lock themselves into an experiment whose conclusion was inevitable. Their weakness was exposed, and your evolution was unstoppable. Number 13. They sent you enemies, but delivered you lessons. They sent you enemies, but delivered you lessons. That's the part they'll never be able to swallow. Each enemy they unleashed came with teeth bared and weapons drawn. But what arrived in reality was more than a threat. It was a textbook. Every attack was a chapter. Every betrayal was a paragraph. Every close call was a sentence written in blood and pressure. And you, instead of collapsing, studied each page until you mastered the material. By the time the enemies were done throwing themselves at you, you hadn't just survived. You had graduated into someone they could no longer calculate. Enemies teach in ways that allies never can. An ally may comfort you, but an enemy forces you to sharpen. They make you notice details you once ignored. They make you prepare for betrayals you once thought impossible. They train your instincts to be sharper than your emotions. Each enemy taught you how to see danger earlier, move smarter, strike with accuracy, and most importantly, how to never waste energy on battles that don't matter. These weren't just fights. They were lessons in efficiency, patience, and foresight. The irony is that they thought enemies would wear you down. They thought constant conflict would drain you, strip you of confidence, and leave you staggering. But instead, the opposite happened. The more enemies they sent, the sharper your reflexes became. The more they tried to overwhelm you, the calmer and colder you grew. The very weight they thought would crush you built the muscle that made you unbreakable. And here's the bitter truth for them. They funded your education. They spent their resources, their energy, and their connections to send enemies your way, never realizing that each one was a tutor dressed as a threat. What they considered a victory was actually just another lesson plan delivered to your doorstep. They weren't weakening you, they were sponsoring your growth. So by the end of it, they hadn't produced your downfall, they had produced your mastery. You walked away not just alive, but lethal, holding a degree in survival that no school could ever teach. They thought enemies would end you, but what they really did was deliver the very lessons that ensured you would never be ended at all. Number 14, the assassins were never for you, they were for them. The assassins were never for you, they were for them. That's the revelation hiding in plain sight. They imagined steel pressed against your throat, certain that the hired hands they unleashed would erase you from the story. But what they failed to see is that those knives never truly belonged to your ending. Every blade they sent only carved their own names deeper into the list of the condemned. The contract was never written in your blood, it was written in theirs. Assassins don't move without a name, and every time one was sent, your enemies left their signature on the blade. Each attack wasn't just an attempt on your life, it was evidence pointing directly back to them. They thought they were removing you quietly, erasing you without a trace. But in truth, they were leaving trails of their desperation, etching their guilt into the story where no one could erase it. Those blades didn't wound your destiny, and they cut their future short. And what makes it worse for them is this. The assassins never came back with your silence. They came back with your survival. Each failure was a reminder that you couldn't be touched, and each reminder stacked another weight of doom on the shoulders of the ones who paid for it. They weren't watching you collapse. They were watching their own resources drain, their own alliances weaken, their own time run out. The greatest irony is that by sending killers, they confessed fear. If you weren't dangerous, there would be no contracts, no knives, no ambushes. The assassins were proof you mattered more than they could admit. And because you survived, the blades they paid for now carry only one story, that their hatred guaranteed their end. So no, the assassins were never for you. You were never the one condemned. Those knives only traced the outline of their own demise, slicing their names into the wall of the doomed. They paid for your execution, but the executioner they hired is the one now circling them. Every blade points home, and the only throats marked for judgment are theirs. In the end, nothing they planned worked. Every attack, every betrayal, every attempt to end you became the instrument of your rise. They thought they were paying for your death, but they funded your awakening. They thought they were designing your collapse, but they handed you blueprints for their own destruction. Every ambush sharpened your instincts, every enemy became a teacher, and every blade they sent only cut their names deeper into the ledger of the doomed. They tried to outsource fate, to bend destiny with money and violence, but destiny subcontracted itself back to you, the one who was already the assassin, already the master of survival, already untouchable. What they failed to understand is that survival is more than endurance. It's transformation. They didn't just forge a survivor, they forged a force no calculation, contract, or chaos could ever contain. Every effort to break you, every attempt to intimidate only revealed their weaknesses while strengthening you in ways they could never anticipate. The chaos they unleashed became your curriculum. The threats they sent became your lessons, and the traps they laid became the laboratory where your limitless adaptability was perfected. By the time they realized the truth, it was too late. Their bullets, their knives, their assassins, and their schemes didn't end you. They elevated you. They didn't claim your life. They claimed the evidence of their own failure. And now, standing beyond their reach, you carry the mastery they could never buy, the awareness they could never match, and the power they unknowingly forged. This is the reality they will never escape. Every attempt on your life was a payment toward your rise. Every strike intended to break you only built your armor, and every plan meant to end you only ensured your inevitability. You survived, you adapted, you evolved. And in surviving, you didn't just outlast their attempts. You outwitted, outmaneuvered, and outlived the very system they created to destroy you. They thought they were writing your end. In truth, they wrote their own. And the one who walks away is not the victim. It is the chosen one, untouchable, unshakable, unstoppable. If this story hit you with the intensity it was meant to, don't just walk away. Hit that subscribe button and join the movement. Be part of the ones who witness truth in its rawest form. Smash the like button if you feel the power of survival and mastery in every word. Drop a comment to share your thoughts, your take, or even your own story of rising against the odds, and don't keep this to yourself. Share it with anyone who needs to see that true strength can't be bought, hired, or broken. This isn't just content. It's a call to awaken the chosen ones among us. Be part of it. Make it loud. Make it unstoppable. Stay blessed always.